Hello everyone, welcome back, and today is Mitigation Day at COP29 and I am at the Water Pavilion. In my capacity as the Global Youth Champion for Water, I will be speaking to the Deputy Minister of Canary Island, Her Excellency Julieta Schallenberg. She will be talking to us about how water is important in climate change mitigation. Briefly introduce yourself and tell us why water is important when we talk about climate change mitigation.
The Canary Islands is an archipelago in Spain and is an autonomous region in Spain. We were talking about water cycle today because we spend a high amount of electricity for the whole water cycle in the Canaries. More than 70% of our electricity is devoted to water production in the whole water cycle, which is desalination, pumping, reuse, and wastewater treatment. A special focus for us in the Canary Islands is desalination. We don't have much water. We're a small region of more than 2 million inhabitants, but we have more than 60 million tourists per year. That means a high amount of energy and a high amount of water. There are some islands that have almost no water at all. That means all the water comes from desalination plants. In average, around more than 30% of the water in the Canary Islands come from desalination plants. And in an average of regional average is 6%, more than 6% of the electricity demand. But in some islands, the water cycle accounts for nearly 40% of the electricity demand. So it really is an issue how we produce water and how can we reduce the dependency on oil, because on top of that, we only have 20% of our electricity coming from renewables. That means at the end of the day, we are producing water and electricity, so that means also water, using oil coming with ships to the Canary Islands.
Okay, so you are an island nation with finite fresh water, as you have said. So how are you able to deliver water and sanitation in a sustainable way without actually increasing the emissions?
What we are doing in the Canary Islands, we are, as I said, a region, autonomous region in Spain, and what we are doing is we saw the whole picture, and we saw other drawbacks in the system. That, for example, our water distribution network has a very high losses, so nearly 50% of the water is lost somewhere in the distribution network. That means even if we are very efficient desalinating water, we are losing a lot of water on the way. So these kind of projects that are, let's say, for the overall shape of the society, these projects that we say, okay, this is not for one company, this is for all the people visiting us, and it's for the society and administration. How we are going to finance, how we are going to put so much money into the system to restore and all do what we need to do. Also, increase the reuse of wastewater. We only reuse 1/3 of our wastewater production. We have a lot of. We need to make some campaigns also to make like tourists should use less water, but also our citizens. So there's a lot of things that have to be done from the public side, and we really believe there's not enough money in the public side to do things well. So we came with the idea of what we call the indirect compensation projects. Normally in Spain, for example, we have the CO2 compensation projects, which are reforestation projects, which is business as usual. So what do we put in our database for CO2 compensation? Normally reforestation projects. So we came with the idea, we have our law, a regional law for climate change and energy transition, and we say, okay, first, companies located in the Canary Islands have to compensate within the Canary Islands. So you cannot go somewhere else to compensate CO2. The second is we don't have enough reforestation projects, for sure. So we are going to include in our database indirect compensation projects. That means, for example, projects that are dealing with the water cycle, but are for the benefit of the overall society could be one of the projects included in this database. For example, if you're reducing the water losses, which are beneficial for all of us, this could be a compensation project for CO2 emissions, because at the end of the day, you will reduce the CO2 emissions. And so those companies that need to compensate will go to the database and say, okay, I have to compensate such an amount of CO2, I will pick up one project and will finance that project. So that's the way we see how private finance can go to the CO2 mitigation and can benefit the overall society.
Tourism is really a very significant part of the Canary Islands economy. And how do you ensure that the demand for water and sanitation in the sector, the tourism sector, aligns with your climate mitigation goals?
So one tourist will consume as much electricity as 2.5 local citizens. This is the number we came to. And then the number could even be, the figure could also be higher than 2.5. But this is the minimum we have. So we have to make awareness for tourists, but that's not enough. So at the end of the day, there are a lot of companies, global companies, tourist companies, that are benefiting from the fact of going to the Canary Islands, bringing tourists to the Canary Islands. And at the end of the day, we have seen those days this year some sensitivity from the population, where have been some manifestations, a public manifestation against the tourist sector. And this is a little bit like this syndrome, like not in my backyard, in renewables, or at the end of the day say, okay, we have a lot of tourists that are consuming our land, but we are not benefiting from that. So one way of dealing with that is how can the tourist industry, because it's an industry, protect the islands? Because at the end of the day, if you cannibalize the islands, at the end of the day, you will not have a safe and sustainable destination, will be not attractive anymore. So at the end of the day, the tourist industry also wants to protect and make the Canary Islands a sustainable destination to preserve the future business. This is the whole idea. We are coming to this database where we will put projects that have to deal with the CO2 emission reduction, and we will put that also for the tourist industry to be funded for the society by them.
Okay, and lastly, I have heard you say before that islands are like laboratories, and this is because you see fast the climate change impacts. What do you mean by this?
In comparison to mainland Spain, or in comparison to mainland in general, we see the effect of mitigation and adaptation, also all the consequences we see it much earlier. Why? An example is renewable energies, for example. We have much less renewable energy penetration in the electricity grid than Spain. We have 20%, Spain has nearly 60%. But we have a lot of renewable already that cannot be fed into the grid. So it's what we call curtailments of renewable energy. Why is that? Because we have isolated electrical grids that need to see the storage much sooner to storage the electricity, like wind or solar energy. And if not, there will be curtailments. You don't see that in the mainland. You see it when the penetration of renewable is much, much higher, like 50 or 60%. So we see all the things first, because our islands are smaller, our electricity nets are smaller and isolated. The same is a little bit with the rise of the oceans. We are surrounded by coastal areas, we are small islands, so we see the effects much sooner because our territory is completely surrounded by the sea. And also this has a high impact, or will have a high impact in tourism. Maybe we don't have heat waves like in other parts, but our heat waves affect our health and tourism and citizens much sooner, because they don't have other places to go, let's say. So you have to go out of the islands. And for example, we have what we call calimas, which is dust coming from the Sahara Desert. And we have seen lately in the last years how these calimas increase in period and in time, affecting the health of the population. So all this is a little bit, when you go to a very broad land, it can be softened somehow by different effects. But when you are in a small territory, you're directly affected by all these small changes in a higher way. It's an more intensive way of seeing these effects.
Thank you so much for speaking to us today. So that was Her Excellency Deputy Prime Minister Julieta Schallenberg, who was speaking to us about the role of water in mitigation